Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Votaw. Here's Kathleen.
My guest today is Simone Stolzoff, a San Francisco-based journalist and consultant. I'm a big fan of his new book, The Good Enough Job, which challenges the societal pressure of finding our dream job and encourages us to prioritize work-life balance. Simone, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast to talk about your book. Could you share the inspiration for it?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. There are sort of two ways in. So the first is my background as a journalist. And so for years, I was a reporter at places like The Atlantic and Quartz, and I reported on the workplace. And so this was my beat. But there's also a kind of personal angle to the book, which is I, like many people of my millennial generation, inherited all these scripts about pursuing my dream job and following my passion from an early age. And so I spent my entire 20s looking for a perfect job. I spent a few years working in tech and a few years working in food and a few years working in journalism and design, all the while looking for that vocational soulmate, for that one job that could help me self-actualize. And so the Good Enough Job is sort of a foil to the pursuit of a dream job. And it's also an allusion to this theory devised by Donald Winnicott that maybe we can get into later.
Sure. And did you love writing? Clearly you just wrote a book. So is that a piece of the fun for you?
Yeah, of course. I was a born writer. I have a sort of superhero origin story of in the second grade, I skipped my brother's birthday party so that I could stay in class and write for the afternoon. But it's always been, something that I've taken an interest to. And it's actually a theme that I explore in the book because through the process of writing, I have derived a lot of meaning, a lot of identity. I've built really close relationships in my life. And so I think often when we think about work and what we do to earn a living, there is this sort of polarizing spectrum where on one hand, there's sort of the live to work people that think that work is the center of life and finding something that you love to do is one of the most important things that you can find over the course of your lifetime. And the other end of the spectrum, there's sort of the anti-work people who are thinking that, work should be a means to an end, and in the end, we should go home. And so this book, in many ways, is my own struggle with that polarity of how can you pursue meaningful work while not letting what you do subsume who you are.
Absolutely. Let's spend some time on who you are. So tell us who you are. Where'd you come from? What'd you do? What were your dreams early? What's your journey been up till now?
Yeah, so I alluded to this a little bit, but in college I studied poetry and economics.
I saw
and so
that. That's
from
a
an
cool
early
combo.
age. Yeah, or cool, or the recipe for an existential crisis, depending on how you frame it. But, so there's always this tension between the pursuit of art and the pursuit of commerce in my life. And coming out of school, I moved back to the Bay Area and started working in tech. That was sort of the industry du jour at the time when I was entering the labor market in the early aughts. And as I said, I sort of have been weaving in and out of a few different industries trying to find a perfect job. So I worked as a copywriter, I worked in marketing and communications, then I ended up getting a job as a staff writer for a digital magazine. And it all sort of came to a head at this point in my late 20s when I was reached out to by a recruiter for this prestigious design agency. And on one hand, it's woe is me, the agony of having to decide between two attractive job offers. But to be honest, I couldn't make up my mind for the life of me. On one day, I would wake up on one side of the bed and think, oh, I have to stay in journalism. On the other day, I would think, oh, I have to pursue this prestigious opportunity that might not be around forever. And it was through that process, that wrestling between these two jobs, where it felt like I wasn't choosing between two jobs as much as I was choosing between two versions of me. And my identity had just become so wrapped up in my own job and that sense of how did we get here? How did work and our identities become synonymous for so many Americans in particular, became that first kernel that eventually led to the research project that became the book.
So tell us more about the research behind the book.
So the form of the book, each chapter follows a different worker from a different industry. So there's a chapter about a Michelin star chef, and there's a chapter about a librarian and a Wall Street banker and a software engineer at Google who lives in a van in the Google parking lot, just to name a few. And so each chapter is a vignette of this one sort of worker at a different place in the economy, as well as an exploration about a different theme. So, for example, the software engineer at Google chapter is about the theme of the office and where we work and what is sort of the double-edged sword of some of the cushy office perks that are associated with some employers today. The chapter about the Wall Street banker is about success and status and why do we chase these totems of status and prestige, and what is the potential cost if we're not accounting for what we ourselves value as opposed to what the market values. So the research process was, spending time with a lot of the 9 characters that I profile throughout the book, as well as weaving in conversations with experts and psychologists and academics to try and paint a picture of what is the kind of the state of work culture in America today.
I think that's very interesting because, when you meet someone at a cocktail party and you say, so what do? You don't say, so who are you? I mean, that's an interesting phenomenon. What did the psychologists say behind that? Because we do identify with what we do versus who we are.
Yeah, it's such a canonical piece of American small talk. I think it's important to call out that this sort of work centricity is in many ways a uniquely American view on the world. I remember once asking a Chilean guy that I met at a hostel what he did, and he looked at me like I had asked him for the balance of his bank account. He said, you mean for work? And, my family's Italian, and there's a very different perspective on the just prioritization of work relative to faith or to family or some of the other considerations of life.
Yeah. And, in my book, Dare to Care in the Workplace, so we both share the love of writing and, being more centered in who you are versus what you do. We talk a lot about, kind of having a little faith in each other, having a little faith in something. And I was very interested in the chapter in your book that you referred to about America's changing religious landscape. So touch on that a little bit, because I think it's a crisis in our country in particular that people are moving away from faith. So tell us more about that concept.
If you look at the data, the largest religious group in America is not evangelical or Catholic. It is no religion at all.
Right.
It's this combination of folks who either are agnostic or atheist or don't believe in anything in particular. And this is a historical change. About 50 years ago, only 7% or so Americans did not associate with an organized religion. And today it's nearly 30%. Over 1 in 4 Americans don't associate with a religion at all. And, there's a few different explanations that explain how we got here. But the brass tacks is that role that religion once played in so many people's life as a source of community, as a source of purpose, as a source of meaning and identity is no longer there for many Americans. And in the book, I make the argument that many of us have turned to the workplace to try and fill some of those roles that religion once filled in our lives.
That's sad. I mean, that's a really sad statement. When I speak to my audiences, they always read my bio. Isn't that an interesting phenomenon, Simone? Like, they read what you've achieved, and that's how you're introduced.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And especially with social media these days, there are more and more opportunities to parade around our professional accomplishments for the world to see. But I think there is a real risk in centering just what we do professionally as if it were synonymous with who we are as people. For one, it's a burden that our jobs are not necessarily designed to bear. If we're looking to work for self-actualization, if we're looking to work for transcendence, it's not something that a job can always deliver on. As so many people found out in the last few years of the pandemic, if your job is your sole source of identity and meaning and you lose it, even if it's to no fault of your own, what's left? And the other aspect of it is that, we are more than just workers. We are siblings and neighbors and friends and parents and citizens. And if we solely invest in our professional selves, it can neglect the other sides of who we are. And so ultimately in the book, I make the case for diversifying the sources of meaning and identity in our lives, looking for ways to diversify, much as an investor might benefit from diversifying the stocks in their portfolio. We too benefit from being able to cultivate and invest in different aspects of who we are.
That's so intriguing. Are you familiar with the work of Marcus Buckingham at all?
No, tell me about it.
So Marcus wrote this book, Love Plus Work, and it's complementary to your concepts. And he talks about the fact that we all need to do 25% of what we love every day. He calls them red threads. And I believe that to my core. And I think this notion of a dream job is kind of unrealistic. What's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with trying to align your work with your interests, but the expectation that your work can always be a dream is not realistic. There's monotony that exists in every line of work. And if you think about happiness as sort of the difference between expectations and reality, if we're always looking to our work to deliver on that sky-high expectation, it creates a lot of room for disappointment. So the title of the book, The Good Enough Job, is an allusion to a theory that was devised in the mid-20th century by this British pediatrician named Donald Winnicott. And Winnicott observed how there was this growing idolization of parenting, of these parents that were looking to be absolutely perfect and shield their kids from any sort of negative emotions or harm. And then when the child inevitably felt fear or frustration or anger, the parent took it extremely personally. And so the parallel that I'm making is this growing idolization that Americans in particular are placing on their jobs, looking for them to be dreams and sources of perfection. And much like a crying toddler, a job is not something you can always control. And so Winnicott's wisdom was this theory that he proposed, the good enough mother or the good enough parent, where an approach that valued sufficiency as opposed to perfection would allow the child to learn to self-soothe and teach the parent to not lose themselves in the children's emotions. And so similarly, I make the argument about the value of, instead of treating work as the center of life, thinking first about what is your vision for a life well lived, and then think about how your job can serve that vision. One of my favorite things is the framework is intentionally subjective. So for you, a good enough job might mean a job that pays a certain amount of money, or a job that has a certain title, or is in a certain industry, or gets off at a certain hour so that you can pick up your kids from school. But whatever it is, recognizing when you have it, when your job is good enough to support the life that you want to live, can free us from a lot of the questioning of, is there something better out there? Should I be looking around? And really appreciate a job for what it is, which is a means to live your life.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Why do you think people work? What's the primary reason?
I think it's different strokes for different folks. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a mentor of mine in my senior year of college. Actually, I had the opportunity to interview my favorite writer in the world, this man named Anis Mojgani. He's the current poet laureate of the state of Oregon. And I was a 22-year-old poetry student about to embark on this unknown future. And, I was about to interview my professional idol, a professional poet, no less. And I asked him, Anis, how do you feel about the mantra, love what you do and never work a day in your life? And he said something that I'll never forget. He said, Simone, some people do what they love for work, and other people do what they have to for work so they can do what they love when they're not working. And neither is more noble. And I think that last part is key. We live in a society that loves to revere people whose identities and their jobs neatly align. The social entrepreneur or the astronaut or maybe even, the podcaster. But here was, my professional idol telling me that it's all right to have a day job. So I think fundamentally, the first thing that a job is a living. It's a way to pay for the material needs that we have in this world. Fundamentally, jobs are economic contracts. They're an exchange of your time and your labor for a paycheck. Certainly, they can be much more than that. And for some people, their jobs are a calling, their jobs are an identity. But I think the more clear-headed we can be about the sort of transactional nature of work and the real reason why the majority of people work, which is to earn enough money to pay for their lives, the healthier relationships will ultimately have.
Yeah, I agree with you. And my premise in my books are people work for their family and to have a great life. The employers are really number 2 or 3 if we're lucky enough that somebody might have faith too, So when people maybe subconsciously prioritize why I work, maybe it's for the money, but it's really to make sure they have shelter and food, for their family. That's the number one reason that they go to work. And I love the quote from your mentor and your idol there that, whatever we do, it's noble. We have to get through this life and pay for the life we lead, whatever choices we make there. I love the life well lived. I mean, when you vision out a life well lived for yourself, your legacy, what would that look like?
Yeah, it's an important question to ask ourselves. I mean, for me, I think I start with being able to live in a place that I want to live. I think geography is so important in the way that it dictates where we spend our time, who we spend our time with, the types of things that we love to do. And so I feel very lucky to live in the Bay Area, which is also where I grew up, and be so close to my parents and being able to be close to people that I've known for the entirety of my life. So when I think about a life well lived, I think about being able to have autonomy over how I spend my time and having variation over the course of my weeks, about not feeling rushed or having to feel reactive over the course of my days or my weeks, and being able to have a level of agency over carving out what I want to be doing with my attention and my time. It means being able to maintain a healthy lifestyle, being able to afford to pay for the foods that I want to eat, and to be able to care for the people around me and my family. It's a level of stability and security that I can rely on so that I'm not always having to think about, when the next paycheck is going to come. And it also incorporates a level of meaning in my work. I think one of the misconceptions when people just sort of look at the cover of my book is thinking that I'm somehow anti-work or advocating for not working. And I don't believe that to be true. I think work is important. We work more than we do just about anything else in our life, and how we spend those hours matter. But rather than thinking about work as the only thing that's worth investing in, the only thing that is worthy of our best hours and our best energy, I prefer an approach that thinks about work in concert with all of these other aspects of ourselves that make life meaningful.
I really think that's beautiful. Having meaning is the fabric of our lives, and our experience we have with other people and relationships with family and loved ones. Those are things that are really important. Okay, Simone, we have more to get to, but we have to take a break. Coming up in the second part of my talk with Simone Stolzoff, the author of The Good Enough Job, Simone shares some advice on choosing the right career path.
But at the end of the day, the best way to find a career path is to really be thinking about what it is that you value, what it is the market values, and trying to make those decisions yourself.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnVotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.